In December 2018, I stood in front of 60 predominantly male workmates to tell them what was one of the hardest things I ever had to do. Hey, guess what, guys? I'm a girl. It's not an easy thing to say to everyone that you know, that there's a different side to you, a side that you've been keeping secret. It strips you bare. You are naked in front of everybody, and nothing will ever take away that truth. It was incredibly scary. I had no other way to do this. I couldn't disappear away to another town or state to hide. I loved my job. The people I worked with, my friends and my children were all here where I lived, in a regional community where everyone knows everyone. I had no choice but to transition at work. So I decided in 2016, that's what I'll do. I'll try and do. It was important for me to tell my workmates my story so they understood why I was making this decision. It was not going to be something that I could say without giving some background into what brought me to this milestone in my life. I shared with them the softer and abbreviated version of my life. Please be warned that the details following some people will find distressing and comes with a trigger warning for childhood sex abuse. In my early years, I was happy. I played with the neighbourhood kids, I rode my bike, played outside and enjoyed barbecues with family and friends. But I never did like footy or sports generally. I secretly played with my sister's dolls. Deep inside, I knew I was different to boys. I was soft and gentle and very sensitive. By middle primary school, I avoided the mean boys, although I often didn't realise they were being mean, and became friends with many of the grade 2 girls. We played on the monkey bars, pretended to ride ponies and make house. I liked them and they liked me too. We would write love letters to each other and collect flowers. In the same year, I was raped by a gang of thugs and older men after school. It was a ruthless assault on my soul. I'll spare you the details, but this dramatically changed the course of my life. From that day onwards, I never thought about it again, not even for a split second, for fear of absolute terror returning. I blocked it. I became timid and distrustful, especially around boys and men, including my father, who I felt was frustrated with my inability to do boys' things. My parents were too busy keeping up with the Joneses to recognise what was happening in their youngest child's life, despite many visits to the doctor. My mother was a 60s housewife and not a worldly woman. Whilst she loved me deeply, she had no possible way of knowing what was happening to me and was too busy trying to please my very demanding father. She just wanted everybody to be happy. My father was a scary, angry man, a high-functioning alcoholic, a narcissist who would scream and slap my mother around. That was normal for me growing up. I knew I was a lot like Mum and nothing like him. I knew I should stay low or I'll be next. I knew I would get it too. Where I lived, 2 boys constantly were mean to me. They treated me very badly and they would hit me in the nose until it bled. But they were all I had. They were my friends and I was out of my parents' way and they offered me something my parents were not providing me, love and attention. I was around 10 years old when they began having sex with me. It really was the only time they were nice to me, and I knew they loved me then. They would take it in turns as the other one kept watch for their parents. I was sent to the boys' school in the following year. I spent a lot of time by myself hiding in the library. There was no one there to play with. The whole place was crawling with mean boys. 2 bullies from the neighbourhood also went to the same school and taught the other boys how to intimidate me too. It was funny for them, it was scary for me. At school they hated me, but in their attic, they were my best friend. An older teenage boy in my neighbourhood became sexually interested in me when I was around 11, and he abused me for quite some years too. He taught me to pretend to be his prostitute. He was nicer to me than the other boys. I remained in a sexual relationship with the youngest of the boys on and off for 12 years, well into university. I tried hard to pretend to do the male thing. I really did. But I think to everyone else it was clear I was different. I lived in a daze, a fantasy world, a childish world where my social development was put on hold. But I was never able to recover from one trauma before the next one hit. When I was 15, I had enough of being bullied and treated poorly at the boys' school. My grades were in decline and I gave up and I left a perfectly good school, as my mother would say. I loved drawing and was quite good at it, particularly faces. So I went to tech school to do art. At tech, I had female friends again. During all of this time, I felt unhappy in myself. I loved being with girls, but was deeply sad. What was wrong with me? I'd ask myself. In secret, I would shave my legs and armpits in winter where I could hide them. I wore my mum's and sister's clothes and makeup when they weren't home. I loved clothes. They made me feel attractive. Even my choices in boys' clothes I could match well and make my legs look nice. When I looked in the mirror, I felt happy, but very lost. My heart was telling me one thing, but my mind was saying I'm going to get punched up if anyone finds out. My anxiety around the whole thing became very intense and I made this my big secret. By the end of VCE, my abusive childhood lover had spread the good news to his jock footy mates from the old school, and I was encouraged to go to parties with him to put out. It was very confusing. I really did think they liked me now. In secret, I dressed in females' clothes all throughout my arts degree, but to those around me, I was a weirdo. I really didn't like anybody because I felt like they didn't like me. I didn't like me. I treated people how I felt. My brain exploded in the last year of uni. My mother divorced her second husband and I had a meltdown and quit my degree 11 weeks before the end. I was underweight, a chain smoker. I had frequent fear of death panic attacks, heart palpitations, and felt sad and scared all the time. I felt the world was truly against me and I was living in a state of constant stress. I left the city and my childhood lover behind me and escaped to the country to live with my dad, where he moved years before after leaving mum. I buried my feminine feelings and became a man. Then I met my future wife in another town 4 hours away and moved there, and we got married in '99. I decided to go back to uni in 2000 to study science. Dad died in a tractor accident in January the same year, and we had our first son about 12 months later. In third year of my engineering degree, uni take 2, something happened. I started thinking about all the naughty stuff that had happened with the boys when I was a teenager and started to get confused and hate myself again. I was blaming myself for what happened. It was my fault, but hidden under the layers of guilt and shame was my childhood nightmare, and it was back. Bathing my son was a trigger that would unravel my dark memories. He was so helpless. Why would anybody hurt a child? I would think to myself in my mother's voice. I was resolute that I was a dad now, I was a grown adult, I had responsibilities, and I needed to get my shit sorted out for this kid. I knew something very bad had happened to me when I was young. The memories felt like they were on the tip of my tongue, but I didn't know what it was. But I remembered, and I relived a nightmare. These were extremely hard times as I recalled my miserable childhood. My marriage became another victim of my past where neglect, abuse, sexuality and gender identity were intertwined as one. I fought hard to see my son, but had to legally defend my suitability as a parent to my ex, and I continued with my 5th year at uni, 8th year all up. I refused to quit again. I was stronger this time. In my final year, I met my second wife after a few weeks on my own. I continued with trauma counselling whilst writing multiple statements to the police. I had numerous meetings with psychologists, doctors, specialists, lawyers and the police. I received funding from the Victims of Crime Tribunal to continue counselling. My second marriage brought another son, but that failed in 2013. Again, I continued to battle on to write down everything I could remember about that day, and it was as scary as hell. When would my life get better? Maybe it would be easier if I just died. Again, my children that triggered my memories of my own experiences, but also of the boys that abused me. It was a very difficult love, but it was but a love for my children that surpassed all and kept me fighting. More recently, I forgave the people that hurt me, and I was able to put much of the abuse I endured behind me. I was beginning to heal, but I was thinking, why did I still feel like a woman inside, and why was it becoming more intense, like when I was a teenager? For a very long time, I concluded that it was because I was raped and abused, and that I always took the feminine role in that abuse. I was the controlled rather than the controllee. But then it occurred to me that some of my feelings were separate to the abuse. They were me, still hiding safe from the world. You see, when you're a child, you have childish views of the world. They did it to me because I was naughty, or they thought I was a girl, or I was different or special somehow. They were reasonable thoughts for a child that did not know what sex was and still believed in Santa Claus. So when I felt like I was a girl inside a boy's body, it was terrifying, because that might mean I wanted it or enjoyed it, and therefore it was my fault and I'd asked for it. Sounds familiar, right? But I didn't want to be naughty, and therefore I didn't want to be a girl, and therefore I didn't want to be different, and I fought it for 35 long years. I tried to be super masculine. I even joined the army and tried to be society's view of normal for so long, and it exhausted me. There's something a little bit different about my brain, and there always has been. I was born this way. When I was young, I had no reference point to how I was feeling, nothing on TV, in books, except for perhaps Klinger in MASH. Except no, he was a joke. We have words for it now, and I realised I am transgender. The core of who I am as a person has not really changed. I'm an honest person, I'm a caring person, I want everybody to be happy, I have accepted who I am, and it brings me great pleasure and great sense of inner peace, but it is difficult to explain. If you're having troubles relating, it's okay. It's a good chance you're not transgender, and don't worry, I'm damn sure it's not contagious. But I was tired of pleasing everyone, fitting into society's ideas of who I should be. I just wanted to be me. I just wanted to be happy. This was my sliding door moment, and I chose to walk through it. More than 12 months after coming out at work, I've settled into a new life as a woman. I have new friends, and most people accept me. I am genuinely happy. I've lost my sons to their inability to understand a world far more complex than the ones in their bubble. However, I live in hope that they will come back to me in good time. It hasn't all been a wonderful joyride, but my inner happiness is a symbol of not only my ability to overcome some really challenging situations, but to remain hopeful in a world full of uncertainty, to appreciate every breath I breathe. Because for all the times in my life, there could have been a different outcome. It didn't happen, and each time I became stronger. One thing I am certain of: be yourself, be your best self. Don't be afraid to let anybody get in your way of being the best you can be. We all have a time to shine. I know where my heart is. It's a woman's heart. Thank you.